I never thought my life could change in a single moment. But then it happened. A phone call in the middle of the night, a panicked voice on the other end, and just like that, everything collapsed. Only hours before, I was a wife, returning to a warm and familiar home. But by the time the sun rose the next morning, I had become a widow. My husband Daniel died in a workplace accident at a construction site. He was only 43, far too young to leave this world. When the police knocked on my door at dawn, I knew something was wrong, but I still couldn't believe what they were saying. A scaffolding collapse, a minor safety oversight, and just like that, the man I loved was gone forever. My life changed overnight. I received a life insurance payout and compensation from Daniel's company, totaling around $450,000. It was a significant amount of money, but it did nothing to fill the void he left behind. My late husband's parents were too old to worry about finances. They told me, "We don't need the money, dear, keep it and live the rest of your life well." I couldn't refuse their generosity, but I also couldn't find any happiness in possessing that money. Without children, without my partner, my home suddenly felt too big and unbearably empty. Every evening after work, I would open the door to silence. I used to cook 2 meals, one for myself and one for Daniel. But now, all that remained was an empty plate at the dinner table. In the mornings, I still instinctively made 2 cups of coffee, before remembering that there was no one left to drink the second one. I buried myself in work trying to fill the loneliness, but it didn't help much. I worked in medical equipment sales, an industry filled with competition and pressure. I met clients, signed contracts, chased sales targets. Everything continued as before, yet I felt like I was living inside an empty shell. And then, I met Lucas. Lucas was an old colleague I had met at an industry seminar a few years ago. Back then our conversations were brief, just small talk about business trends and market statistics. But this time, our encounter was completely different. I ran into him at a client meeting. As I stepped into the conference room, Lucas was already there, leaning back in his chair with his signature smile. He hadn't changed much since the last time we met, still a 46-year-old man with an air of confidence, an engaging way of speaking, and a playful glint in his eyes. But when he saw me, that smile briefly faded. "Emma, wow, it's been a long time," he said, his voice filled with surprise. I gave a small, distant smile, feeling something strange about hearing my name spoken with such familiarity. "Lucas, I didn't expect to see you here." We quickly returned to the meeting, but throughout the session I could feel Lucas's gaze occasionally glancing my way. After it ended, he walked over, not letting me leave so easily. "Would you like to grab a coffee?" I was about to decline. I wasn't good at small talk after work, and honestly I had no interest in forming new connections. But there was something in Lucas's voice, his sincerity, or maybe his patience, that made me nod. We sat in a small cafe near the office. The atmosphere was quiet, the aroma of freshly roasted coffee filling the air, and between us was a silence I didn't know how to fill. But Lucas didn't seem uncomfortable. He stirred his coffee, then looked at me, waiting. "You know, don't you?" I sighed, feeling like I couldn't avoid the topic. Lucas nodded. "I heard about Daniel. I'm really sorry." I took a sip of my coffee, the bitterness spreading across my tongue. "It's been a long time. But you're still not okay." I looked up at him. Maybe he was right. I had thought I had accepted the truth, but deep down, I was still a woman wrapped in the pain of loss. Lucas didn't press further, he just sat there, silent, yet I could feel the understanding in his eyes. And maybe that was exactly what I needed, someone who didn't try to soothe my pain but simply accepted it. After that coffee, Lucas and I started seeing each other more often. At first, I never thought I would open up to anyone again, but he had a way of making me feel at ease. No forced enthusiasm, no empty reassurances, just someone willing to listen. Everything unfolded naturally, to the point that when I realized I had fallen for Lucas, I couldn't pinpoint exactly when it had begun. Maybe it was on a late night when I texted him without hesitation. Maybe it was when I saw him waiting for me after a long meeting just to make sure I had someone to have dinner with. Or maybe it was when, for the first time in years, my smile no longer felt forced. Lucas was the first to bring up marriage. "Emma, I'm not getting any younger, and I know you don't want to waste time either," he said, his gaze more serious than usual. "We understand each other. I don't want to just pass through your life. I want to stay. I hesitated. A part of me was still afraid. But just like when I agreed to have coffee with him, I found myself nodding again. Partly because I believed in Lucas's sincerity, and partly because I wanted to try again, to see if happiness was still possible for me. We got married after 6 months of dating. Everything happened faster than I had expected. But I didn't feel worried. Lucas was a good husband, at least in the beginning. He was hardworking, attentive, and always knew how to make me laugh. But then, small changes started to appear. After we got married, Lucas suggested quitting his job. My dad is getting weaker, I think it's time for me to take care of him. I didn't object right away. My father-in-law Richard was in his 70s and needed assistance with daily activities. I respected Lucas's devotion to his father, and since my job was enough to support us financially, I agreed. At first, Lucas did his part well. He took care of his dad, did the housework, cooked meals, and managed our expenses. I felt like I finally had a true home. But over time, he started becoming lazy. Dinners were replaced with takeout, the house became messy, and I realized I had to take care of everything myself on the weekends. One evening after a long day at work, I came home to find Lucas sitting on the couch, his eyes glued to his phone. "Aren't you going to make dinner?" I asked, setting my bag down on the table. Without looking up, he muttered, "I'm too tired today, just order something." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. This wasn't the first time, and I knew if I didn't say anything it would become a habit. My father-in-law Richard noticed the change in Lucas even sooner than I did. One evening as I was cleaning up the dining table in the kitchen, he walked in, his voice low. "Emma, would you mind if I said something?" I turned around and saw him looking at me with an apologetic expression. "Lucas, he's not a reliable person. I had hoped that marriage would change him, but it seems that's not the case." I froze. He was apologizing to me for his own son. "Do you know why I put you in charge of the finances?" he continued, his tone steady. "Because I don't trust Lucas. He doesn't know how to handle money, and I don't want you to suffer because of him in the future." His words left me stunned. I had noticed the signs, but I never imagined that even his own father didn't trust him. "I'm making arrangements for my estate," he went on, "and I need your help. Are you willing?" I looked at him, and in that moment, I realized I had stepped into something far more complicated than I had ever imagined. After my conversation with my father-in-law, I started paying closer attention to Lucas. What Richard had said wasn't an empty warning. I could clearly see the changes in Lucas's behavior. He no longer cared about taking care of his father, and if he did anything at all, it was purely for show. At first I thought maybe Lucas was just tired or going through a rough phase, but then I realized the truth. Lucas had never truly cared about his father. Whenever Richard needed something, Lucas would find a way to stall or shift the responsibility onto someone else. If his father needed to see a doctor, Lucas would say I had a car and that I should take him. If something needed fixing in the house, he'd tell me to call a repairman. Little by little, almost everything in the house became my responsibility, or that of the housekeeper. One day, I accidentally overheard a conversation between Lucas and one of his friends. He was laughing, his voice filled with arrogance. "The old man is living longer than I expected, but whatever, the money is still mine in the end." I froze in place. Money? I instantly knew exactly who he was talking about. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. I had always thought that despite his laziness and irresponsibility, Lucas still had some love for his father. But that single sentence made me realize he had been waiting for only one thing: his inheritance. After that night, I tried not to let on that I knew. I continued to observe him. Lucas had no idea I was watching his every word, every action. I saw the smirk on his face whenever he checked his father's bank account. I overheard his complaints whenever Richard needed help. And most importantly, I realized that Lucas had never loved me. He had married me for one simple reason: I was a stable source of income, enough to support him while he waited for his father to die. And then that day finally came. Richard took his last breath on a peaceful morning. I still remember holding his hand, feeling the warmth slowly leave his body. And I cried. Truly cried. He was a kind man, a respectable man, and even though my time with him was brief, I had come to see him as a father. But Lucas? He was different. Just 3 days after the funeral, he began showing his true colors. Gone was the appearance of a devoted husband. Gone were the sweet words. That evening, as I walked into the house, I found Lucas sitting on the couch, legs crossed, a stack of papers in his hand. He looked at me with a smile I had never seen before. A smug, almost triumphant smirk. "Let's get a divorce," he said bluntly. I blinked, my heart slowing in my chest. "What?" "Divorce," Lucas repeated, as if I hadn't heard him the first time. "You already knew, didn't you? I married you because I needed someone to support me financially until my father passed away. But now, I don't need you anymore." A cold chill spread through my entire body. I had known he wasn't sincere, but I never expected him to be this shameless. "You planned this from the beginning, didn't you?" I asked, my voice tight. Lucas chuckled. "Of course. From the start I knew my father had a massive fortune. He worked his whole life, built his wealth, and now, all of it belongs to me." I stared at the man in front of me. This was no longer the Lucas I once loved. "You think it's going to be that simple?" I whispered. Lucas shrugged. "Obviously, I'm his only son. Who's going to stop me from inheriting his money? And you? Well, you're worthless to me now." My chest tightened, not from heartbreak, but from the rage boiling inside me. Lucas thought he had won, but he had no idea he had just made a huge mistake. I left the house I once considered my home with an unsettling sense of calm. There were no tears, no grief, just a cold, quiet clarity. I no longer had to pretend. Lucas had made it clear that I was nothing more than a placeholder for him until his inheritance came through. What he didn't know was that his dream was about to collapse. 2 days after I moved into a temporary hotel, Lucas called me. I answered not because I wanted to speak to him, but because I knew this was going to be entertaining. "Emma, what the hell is going on?" I smiled, holding the phone a little farther from my ear to avoid his furious yelling. "Lucas, what exactly are you talking about?" "The money. Why can't I withdraw anything from my dad's account?" His voice was panicked, almost frantic. I crossed my arms, leaning back against the headboard. "Oh, so you actually tried to withdraw it, huh?" "Of course. I went to the bank this morning, but they told me the money is inaccessible. Why? My father had nearly $450 million, but the bank says I can't touch it. Explain this to me." I took a slow, deep breath, savoring the moment. "Lucas, you never really paid attention to your father's business, did you?" "What do you mean?" "Every single dollar in that account was collateral. Your father invested the entire sum into a frozen food production company in Europe, but the company failed and that money became bad debt. The bank granted him an extension to repay the loan, but now, the time is up. That means the entire account balance is being seized to cover the debt." A long silence stretched on the other end of the line. I could almost hear Lucas's ragged breathing as he tried to process the information. No way," he stammered. "My father wouldn't be that stupid. He was always careful with money." I let out a soft laugh. "He wasn't stupid, Lucas. He just didn't trust you. He knew you only cared about the money, and he didn't want you to benefit from it so easily. He made his final bet, and he had no regrets about his decision." Lucas started to lose control. "No, I don't believe it. There has to be more money, somewhere. I'm his only son. He couldn't have left me with nothing." I smirked. "Oh well, it's not exactly nothing, Lucas. You do have an inheritance." "How much?" His voice was filled with desperate hope. I pretended to think for a few seconds before slowly replying, $70,000. This time I actually heard something drop on the other end of the line. Maybe a glass of water on the table, or maybe it was the last shred of hope inside Lucas shattering into pieces. You're joking, right?" "Not at all, Lucas. Your father left you about $70,000 plus a few small accounts, bringing it to a total of $80,000. That's all you're getting." "No way," his voice cracked, half furious, half in complete despair. "I bet everything on that money. I spent all my savings because I thought I was about to be a millionaire." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? So you spent everything before you even had it?" "I put a down payment on a house in Florida. I bought a brand new car. I spent like crazy because I thought I was about to have hundreds of millions of dollars." I couldn't hold it in any longer. I burst out laughing. "Wow, what a terrible plan." "Emma, please." His tone changed instantly, shifting from anger to desperate pleading. "Can't we reconsider this? We don't have to get divorced. I'll change, I swear. We can work this out. Together. I slowly shook my head, even though I knew he couldn't see me. No, Lucas. There's nothing left to work out. You deceived me from the very beginning, and now you're facing the consequences. But you have money. We can live off your money. Lucas, I sighed. I followed your father's wishes. He left me 20% of what remained, which amounts to $16,000. I accepted it as a gift from him, but it's nothing compared to what you thought you were getting. I'll move on with my life, and you need to learn how to take care of yourself. Lucas was silent for a few seconds, then suddenly he let out a furious scream before slamming the phone down. I stared at the darkened screen for a moment, then let out a long breath of relief. Lucas had dug his own grave, and now he would have to find his own way out. As for me, I was ready to start over, a life free from opportunists like him. 3 days after Lucas's desperate phone call, I unexpectedly received a message from him. Emma, I'm sorry, can we meet, please? I stared at the screen, unsure how to react. I felt nothing for him anymore, no anger, no pity, just cold indifference. Lucas had everything in his hands, but instead of valuing it, he had thrown it all away because of his insatiable greed. I didn't respond, but Lucas didn't stop. He started calling, at first just once or twice, then 5, 10 times in a single morning. I blocked his number, but the very next day he showed up outside the hotel where I was staying. Emma, I need to talk to you, he said, his voice exhausted, his eyes sunken from lack of sleep. I crossed my arms, leaning against the door frame. We have nothing to talk about, Lucas. You don't understand. He reached out as if to grab my hand, but I stepped back. I lost everything, Emma. I have nothing left. I looked at him, feeling something between bitterness and amusement. Oh really? I don't recall being the one who blew through all my savings, put down payments on houses and cars, and spent recklessly on a fortune I never even had. Lucas swallowed hard, panic flickering in his eyes. I know, I messed up, but Emma, can't you help me one last time? I just need a little support to get back on my feet. We were married after all. I crossed my arms, narrowing my eyes at him. Let me guess. You want me to help pay off your debts? Or better yet, you want me to take you back so you can live off my money again? Lucas froze. No. That's not what I... No, I cut him off. Emma, please. No, I repeated firmly, my voice unwavering. You used me, Lucas. You thought I was an idiot. A financial backup you could rely on when needed and toss aside when convenient. And now? Now you come crawling back expecting me to save you? Not a chance. Lucas opened his mouth to argue, but I shut the door right in his face before he could say another word. I didn't need to hear anything else. From that day on, Lucas disappeared from my life. At least for a while. After I refused to help him, Lucas had no choice but to fend for himself. He had burned through all his savings and was now left with only $80,000 from his inheritance, a pitiful sum compared to the massive debts he had racked up. With no one left to rely on, Lucas was forced to return to the job market, but there was one major problem: he had no real skills. Before quitting his job to be his father's caretaker, Lucas had worked in sales. But getting back into the industry wasn't as easy as he thought. After years away from the field, he realized he had lost all the essential skills needed to succeed. He managed to land a job at a medical equipment sales company, ironically in the same industry as mine. But within just 3 weeks, his manager called him into the office. Lucas, if you don't close at least one deal by next week, I'm afraid we'll have to let you go. Lucas tried, he really did, but he simply couldn't keep up. He no longer had the confidence, the persistence, or the skills needed to thrive in sales. Less than a month later, he was fired. Unable to find a full-time job, Lucas had no choice but to take on part-time work just to get by. He worked as a waiter at a small restaurant, spending long hours on his feet every night. I heard that one evening a customer accidentally recognized him and asked, "Aren't you Lucas Turner? I remember you used to work in medical equipment sales, right?" Lucas forced an awkward smile. Yeah, but I switched careers." "Ooh. That's unfortunate," the customer said before casually returning to his meal, leaving Lucas standing there, his face burning with shame. He also tried working as a delivery driver, but the job wasn't as easy as he expected. The money he earned wasn't enough to cover the debts he had accumulated. and day by day his bank account continued to shrink. Every now and then, I would still hear news about Lucas from mutual acquaintances. But I didn't care. I had once loved him, once believed he was the man I would spend my life with, but in the end he was nothing more than an opportunist. Now he was paying the price for his greed and laziness. And me? I was free. Free from the burden of someone like Lucas. I rented a small apartment, just enough space to feel comfortable. I continued working hard, pushing forward in my career. Lucas once thought I would always be his ATM. But now, I no longer provided for anyone but myself. What would happen to Lucas in the future? Thanks, I didn't know. And I didn't care. After a few weeks at the hotel, I moved into a small apartment in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It had just one bedroom and a cozy living room, but that was all I needed. More than anything, I wanted a space that was truly mine, a place where I could finally feel at peace. I took my time settling in, arranging every piece of furniture, every book on the shelf, every painting on the wall. It wasn't a grand house, but it was mine. No one could take it away from me or invade my life again. The $16,000 I inherited from Richard remained untouched in my account, not because I didn't need it, but because I wanted to keep it as a final memory of him. Richard had lived a remarkable life, one not controlled by money but by his own choices. And I wanted to use that money as a reminder to live for myself, not as someone else's safety net. My work continued as usual, but something inside me had changed. I no longer felt exhausted or empty coming home to an empty apartment. Instead, I felt at ease. Life wasn't perfect, but at least I knew I was living for myself, not as a financial crutch for someone else. People still occasionally mentioned Lucas, but I had long stopped caring. I heard he was still struggling, bouncing from job to job, never able to stay in one place for long. He had lost everything: his money, his status, his comfort. And most importantly, he had lost the one person who had truly cared for him. I didn't feel satisfaction, nor did I feel pity. Lucas's story no longer mattered to me. I had moved on. And this time, I wasn't looking back. Life isn't a game of luck, it's the result of the choices we make. Emma once believed in love, once dreamed of a happy home, but in the end she learned that not everyone deserves sincerity. Lucas had destroyed his own future with his greed and entitlement. This story is a reminder. Never let anyone treat you as a tool. Never let anyone dictate your life. Live for yourself, know your worth, and walk away when you need to. What are your thoughts on Emma's story? Do you sympathize with her, or do you think Lucas got exactly what he deserved? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more real-life stories about family, relationships, and the lessons that shape us.